So what we have to do here, of course, we're doing plumbing. Rule number 1, turn off the water. So we have shut-off valves under the sink, nice and simple. Now these ones are not quarter turn valve. They are the style of valve that have gaskets on them. And now this house is really ancient, and they actually don't even have modern plumbing coming up to the cold water line. That's really creative. That's another problem. So we're gonna go downstairs and turn off the main water supply, because these old valves, if the gaskets are bad, they'll end up leaking. And the last thing we need down here is to start ruining the cabinets with water leaking everywhere. So we're gonna be installing, it's actually kind of cool. It's a brand new Kohler cast iron enameled sink. It's a double sink, and it's 30 inches, which is, oddly enough, a little bit too big for this cabinet. So what we're gonna end up having to do is we're gonna have to cut down through the gable side of this cabinet here so that we have enough room to get the sink in. It won't be exactly on center, but it'll only be off about a 1/4 inch. Should be pretty invisible. So because we have to do that, remove this, we're gonna be cutting the countertop. Best to just get rid of the doors. This is a nice quick system. Little pin in the back, just pop them off. So the way you take these braided faucet lines off, really simple. It's a 3/8 fitting. You put your wrench on and you just start loosening it. And if there's a little bit of slack, once you get it loosened up a bit, you can usually do it with your fingers. These aren't really difficult to attach. And traditionally, it's just a little bit of a gasket in there. So the reason you need a wrench is when you do it finger tight to install, you take it and you give it another half turn. That's usually how you set it. Whew. Okay, so this is never fun, but you really can't do this blind, so it's always good to get right in here. It's kind of like going for a trip in an MRI machine. Here we go. It's a single faucet, and they have just this little threaded piece here to hold that in. And on the other side, I've got my pull-out hose. And these are just finger tightened. Of course, with time, you get a little bit of water getting in underneath, and then the particle board on the countertop swells. That's more than finger tightened after a while. So that's good. I'm glad we got that off without too much of a fight. Disconnect this hose so that it will come up through the hole. We got lucky today because this one's plastic and not metal, so I'm all for keeping my life simple. So now we're just going to take it apart in the reverse order of when it was installed. So we're just going to pull out the hose and pull that faucet out. Now this is always going to be nasty underneath. I've never seen this look good. I almost need a crowbar to pull that out. That's ridiculous. The way things are done around this house makes you wonder. I'm playing it safe. I'm going to wear some gloves for the rest of this plumbing. Once you've pulled out the faucet, all we have to do is remove the sink. Back underneath we go. There's a lot of different clip assembly situations going on. This one's really simple. It's just a long screw. And this clip sits in the saddle here. And when you tighten this screw, it goes up. And so it creates a reverse compression, pulls the sink down. So there's usually, 6, 8, maybe 10, depending how aggressive the installer is. Just double check, reach around, make sure everything's good. We're not connected to the counter anymore, but we are connected to the plumbing. So we have two options. You can undo the collar right here if you're going with the same kind. And this is really simple. You have two connections here. So this brass ring here connects the drain with a tailpiece. And this plastic one here compresses the tailpiece onto the ABS, usually with a gasket. So we can take our wrench and we can put it on here and we can rip this off. Usually comes off pretty simple. So if you have the ability to reuse your plumbing later, this is a great technique. They just separate like that. And then just give it a pop and out she goes. Here's the original rubber gasket. This is the plasticine that they send you. And you stretch it out around the underside of the sink and then you put it down. The compression on those clips is supposed to hold that in place to keep moisture from getting underneath. You can see how effective it is at doing that. I mean, it's not. That's why when I'm installing my sinks, I like to always make my own gasket out of plumber's putty, because you can always use more than you need and let it get compressed out of the gap and then clean that up afterwards. So as a contractor, I'm always on the lookout for a good deal. I have a lot of suppliers that have discontinued product or return product, or just they've changed their stock and so they're no longer selling something, or they get a manufacturer rebate and they're passing the deal on to us. So I have this horrible habit of buying things that I don't need, anticipating that someday I'll be able to use it. And when I saw this sink, I fell in love, and whether I was putting this in a client's home or in my own home someday down the road, I didn't care. This is a Kohler cast iron sink. This sucker here is worth a lot of money, and I think I picked this up for 50 bucks. Great deal. So when I got the phone call to do this job, I'm like, I got the sink for you, because I saw the cream colored tile. It's not the greatest, but I think this sink is gonna pop and have so much character, you'll forget the condition of the rest of this kitchen. So the downside of buying things that are discontinued or whatever is they don't always have all the parts. In this case, I don't have the template. Obviously somebody bought this sink, special order. This color isn't a standard, it's a bone color. They went to go install it, took out the template, realized they had a problem, and brought the sink back. So what I gotta do is I gotta cut a hole in my existing countertop and into my cabinet that will allow this to be installed without a template. So I have to now make my own template. We're gonna go 31¼ inches wide, 19½ deep. So before we get too carried away and start cutting holes, now that we have our measurements, we want to pull out our faucet and just confirm that this faucet and this sink are going to work together in harmony. My hope is that I can cut the hole and remove the countertop and attach the faucet to the sink only. Not every sink or faucet will do that, so I just want to double check here real quick. Make sure that that'll be possible. We're going to do a partial installation just to see if this will tighten on. This is where we play the Jeopardy music. While I try to find a thread that I can't see, wearing gloves. Ta-da! This might seem monotonous, but trust me, it's a lot easier to do it here and discover you have a problem before you have this all installed. Now some of you might be thinking, oh, you're crazy. Of course it's not going to work. If this was a regular steel sink, the steel gauge is so thin, you'll see on here on the faucet that once it's installed, this nut only leaves so much space. But because it's a cast iron and it's a thick sink, that allows me to go right onto it. So I don't have to drill holes after the fact. I just saved the step because I took 2 seconds to find out if that's going to work. Awesome! So we've taken our measurements of our sink. We've reduced that number for the overhang, marked it with a pencil, and now we're just laying some tape out on the countertop so that visually I can see it. You can maybe see the pencil line in the sun, but when I start cutting with my jigsaw and I get sawdust flying everywhere, it's going to be really hard pressed to know where my line is. This line here represents where I'm cutting. I'm also going to cut right against the back wall. You can see this is a much bigger sink. So we're not relying on any of the structural components of this cabinet to hold that sink in from the front or the rear. And most likely we're going to have to take the whole front support right out before we even bother starting. It's going to be the gable support of each of the side cabinets that's going to be carrying the weight, direct load transfer, just like structure. It'll support itself from side to side without any difficulty at all. So before we can remove this piece of cabinet from the countertop, just good to know, they installed the countertop to the cabinet with these little 1¼ inch screws. You could buy a blade specific for Formica countertops. Not really necessary here because we have a 1/2 inch overlay. You'll find that the chipping that happens with this blade is so minuscule, it's not even a 32nd of an inch. It's irrelevant to our situation. I don't use the tape to keep it from chipping. That's a old wives' tale. If you have to rely on tape to keep something from breaking, you already made the mistake. You know what does work? If you use tape on plaster before you put a nail in it, that works. It's the only time tape is any good to you, Max. now. We just gotta trim up a little bit of the particle board in the back corners here. Grab my fine multi-tool. It's just like a vibration cutting tool. If you don't have one of these bad boys, that's fine. You can always just use a hammer and a chisel. You'll get the same result. This is just a lot cooler. So now we've got the hole set for our sink. The sink is, it's only got a 1/2 inch gap on the front. So we got to cut pretty tight here, but in the back, there's like about a 3.5 inch space, which is awesome because that's where the faucet's going to go. So I just traced out the line for where the sink is going to go. The idea here is we're going to cut through the gable, and then we're going to shim underneath between the sink and the gable so that there's a direct load transfer. So we're not putting all the weight on the countertop. So now we're just gonna roll this in and make sure she's gonna fit. All right, perfect. So now the next step, now that we have our sink in place, we're gonna attach our faucet, our drain, all that kind of stuff. This particular sink doesn't need a gasket. It is just too heavy and too flat, and it doesn't have a cavity for the gasket to sit in. So if you want to seal around this, the only thing you can use is a little bit of cured clear silicone. Let's go. When you're tightening this up, you don't want to go as, full tight right away, especially if you're working alone. If you have someone working with you, like a cameraman, you could reach over and hold it in position while you tighten it. Otherwise, finger tighten so it still has a little bit of flexibility. And we want to lift it forward away from the back wall, and that'll be nice.
You want me to hold it?
No, I'm good. There we go. Just take your pliers. What I want to do is just separate them a little bit. There's tabs on that you can turn with, but if you have a little bit of torque with a pair of pliers, you can really get it tight. So you don't ever want this coming loose once you got the rest of your plumbing put together. Always want to test to make sure you got it on there tight enough. Okay. Yeah, those tabs aren't going to move. Yep, so this particular faucet, it has a threaded assembly and it has a gasket ring inside here. So we're just going to seat this in and push down on this part. Now the gasket assembly is inside, nice and strong there. We're going to just make sure we're not cross-threaded. We're going to tighten this collar on here, and that'll hold it all in place. Doesn't matter how tight you turn this, it won't affect the ability for the faucet to move, so feel free to make sure it's nice and snug. One more thing. Since we're out in the country and we have well water here, it's a little hard. And you saw the cottage plumbing. I'm concerned about debris. I'm going to take my knife here and I'm going to take off this extra bit of screen. How many screens does a tap need? Now that the screens are gone, we won't have a problem with the faucet bunging up. You won't have as much aeration, but I'd rather have a faucet that works. So here we are with our sink components. We've got our basket strainers. We have to take off our nut. We have a nice little gasket here. I call it the top hat gasket, just so I can differentiate between that and a regular O-ring. Now, I am not a licensed plumber. I've just installed a bazillion of these things, so. Okay, and then we just go back where we just were and put all that back together again. So the assembly is simple. You take your ring, you put your brass extension in there, and then you drop in your washer. No paste, glues otherwise necessary. So once we've locked these in place, we'll be good. Now, this is 1.5 inch pipe, and this is an 1.5 inch hole. In the kitchen, your drains are always 1.5 inch hole. The exact same piece, they make it for bathroom sinks, and it's 1.25 inch. Do not get the wrong one. That's a drive back to the store you're going to regret. Slide that on. So it's important that once you have everything finger tight, take the wrench, and you really want to tighten the basket nut here. If it's moving around, just put your hand in the top. Put a little bit of compression resistance there. There we go. Alright, this will get us our measurements. Let me just adjust these. What we're looking to measure, we measure from the inside to where you want the pipe to finish. We're looking at a 9.5 inch pipe. That's comfortable. Alright, so we're going to go and cut that first. We're going to cut a 1 inch piece for here, so we can stick these together and send our water back towards the back corner. In this particular application, there is no P-trap. It's actually in the basement downstairs, which is great because it gives you a little extra storage. You can keep your garbage and recycling under the sink that way. I'm a little old school. Love to sand up my ends a little bit, get rid of my burrs, rough up my fittings. I just like to believe that that might just make things stick a little bit better. I happen to be aware that there's two kinds of ABS out there. One in the building store that I was at today to pick these fittings up doesn't carry the kind that I like to use. My plumbing supply store is closed and it's a Saturday, so I got stuck using this stuff. And I know that if you don't rough it up, it just does not hold very well. Then time to grab the glue. Using the yellow ABS glue here, I'm going to grab a cloth. This stuff can make a mess, so respect people's property and their cabinets. What we're going to do, actually, is just glue these in first. Get these prepped up. Loosen the collar, slide that into position, slide that one into position. And this is really how simple this is. Run your glue, and then turn these in together. Tighten the collars, leave a bit of a slope. Hand tight, and then 1/4. And that's it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a little bit of glue here, get this connection piece in, then I'm going to just kind of dry fit my corner, and I'm going to measure. You can see I have to cut the back pipe, so 10 inches to here, 10 inches to the bottom of this. So I need a one-handed tool so I can hold the pipe so something can cut it. Perfect. The secret when you're plumbing is your last connection. How do you get that pipe in? I always think you want to finish somewhere where you can glue this way and then go like that and then shove it in. So just pay attention to your process. So your last joint's an easy one. and then it'll go together really simple like that. So this is a braided supply line with a 3/8 female connector. It has a gasket inside. So once again, you know, we just got to line it up, find that happy place with the thread, finger tighten it. Now you know you've made it to the gasket. Up, there we go. Then take your pliers, set that on there, about a half turn. You can over tighten those. So this is a lot of tool and a lot of torque. You can keep going until you can't go anymore. The danger of that is if you ever have to take it off and then reattach it again, the gasket will be shot and you'll have to buy a brand new supply line. So just another half a, and if you get a little drip developed, you know, another little quarter turn, that's all you're gonna need. Try to extend the life of your lines. So the last thing we have to do is just silicone the seal around the sink. Because of the nature of the way this is designed, there's no room for a gasket underneath. So we're gonna just take our new Flex 302, love this product. It smells a lot like vinegar, but the reality is it works.